Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Equestria Daily Fandom Podcast. For the first time ever, we have a member of the MLP comic staff on board for the hour to talk about the My Little Pony comics, as well as his experience writing in them. I'd like to thank you very much, Jeremy Whitley, for chilling with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, guys.
Awesome. So we have a lot of questions, both on our side as well as from the fans, so I think we'll just get started with a quick backstory on how you were hired to write the MLP comics.
I feel like everybody has a slightly different version of this story. Mine is, I had sort of gotten into the show first. I have a now 5-year-old daughter who I was doing a lot of stay-at-home dad stuff at that point, doing comics and working in the evening, and then staying at home with her during the day. We stumbled on Friendship is Magic as one of the shows that she liked and I could stand. You can only watch so many episodes of Dora before you just start to lose your mind. And the quality of the storytelling and the characters in Friendship is Magic really kind of pulled me into that. It became something that we sort of watched regularly together. About the same time I was getting into it, the comics were starting. It so happened that I had been sort of talking back and forth with Bobby at IDW about doing something at some point. Bobby is from Charlotte, here in North Carolina, where I also live. I live in Durham rather than Charlotte, but he's out in San Diego now. We'd gone back and forth for a while, and ponies had not really come up until I was actually at Denver Comic Con a few years ago, and I was back to back with Tony Fleece, who was in the midst of Pony Mania at that point. Asked me if I had ever thought about writing for the book, because I had my own comic, Princeless, there, which is an all-ages comic, and it's kind of a small field when it comes to people who do all-ages comics. I said, I'd love to, but I can never really get through people at IDW. And he's like, I'll give you an introduction. Bobby will have you pitch some stuff. I know he's looking for some things. And it just so happened that it was the same time that Friends Forever was getting ready to launch. So, they magically had a blank slate of places where they needed people to come fill in. And I pitched him, I think, 5 stories in total, 2 of which were Discord and the EQD Mark Crusaders, which ended up being Friends Forever number 2, and Luna and Pinkie Pie, which ended up being Friends Forever number 7.
So the 5 stories, 2 of them were immediately just made into them. Did they really need any edits?
And so since Bobby didn't have a whole lot of experience with me, I had gone sort of, he didn't know how much I knew about the show, so he was like, just kind of pitch me a really, rough idea, a bunch of ideas of what you want. So I had little, short paragraphs of what the stories would be. And, those were the 2 that he picked out as ones that he wanted to develop, and he wanted to see sort of full-length pitches, what exactly the beginning, the middle, and the end, where all the story beats be. And, we went back and forth through those a couple of times before, I could really get an idea of what Hasbro was looking for, and he could sort of impress upon me what they wanted. We got those 2 outlines worked out, and he sent those off to Hasbro after, I think it was only really 2 drafts of the outline, and 2 kind of, the Discord and Cutie Mark Crusaders, that one kind of went straight through without any sort of major changes. Even, once we got to the script, Hasbro had very, very little to say about that. They were very happy with it. 7, ended up having quite a bit of, re-maneuvering the way, especially like the ending of the story worked, and making sure that with the Friends Forever we try to hit beats for both characters, so that you don't end up having a story that's all about Pinkie Pie or all about Luna. You want to have both characters kind of learn something. And that was our biggest thing with that one, is just trying to make sure that both of them sort of got equal time and came out of it stronger characters. Eventually that's what ended up coming together, and I still love that story. That ends up being one that there's a lot of bits that I look back on and I was like, yeah, that was a really clever idea.
So when it comes to, like you said that you've been watching the show a lot, and you kind of can see how it is displayed on the screen, and I'd imagine you'd be able to at least tell what the behind-the-scenes work would be as far as like the script is concerned. So, what do you think are the advantages that you have with, working and writing on the comic as opposed to, writing a 22-minute episode?
I think as far as advantages, the main things are, we don't have to necessarily write something that folds into a larger narrative, because in a lot of cases you can see the way that the seasons are constructed on My Little Pony. There are some outliers, but for the most part, they're building towards, something at the end of the season. And that's sort of an advantage in our case in that I don't necessarily have to figure out how to make this one story I want to tell blend into, the course of this larger story. And we get to play with some of the sort of cast-offs of, the main series, things that might not necessarily make it to an episode there, or that they don't really want anything to do with. We can occasionally get to play with those and do something a little different. I tend to see much more in my head, and this is, obviously just from a perspective of somebody who has to do it all the time. I tend to see like they have a lot more room in a 25 minute episode of My Little Pony than we do in a 22-page comic, just for sheer like dialogue and movement.
So you just mean being able to like have more jokes, or have more like not for lack of a better word, like filler, but just more like transitional periods as opposed to the comic? Because I'd imagine when you have a comic, you have a set amount of panels, so you can't really have as many pictures of them like walking along the road to their destination.
Well, yeah, I think in terms of dialogue and in terms of plot, you just have less room in a comic at a standard size than you do in a TV show. Generally, I've found with people who've worked in both areas that it's usually about 2 comics to a half an hour episode. So what would be a 2-part story for the show is at least a 4-part story for the comics. Sometimes more, depending on how much you have to do in the way of action, because anytime that there's action in the comic, we have to sort of, every step of that action has to be a frame. So, if there's a fight, everything that happens in that has to be plotted out on the page, whereas, that may be something that takes 30 seconds in the TV show. It's going to take a couple of pages in the comic.
Yeah, that actually aligns perfectly with a comment that Bobby Curnow actually made a few months back here about how he treats the 4-part arcs within the comic book series as the big huge two-parters for the comic book line. So yeah, that having the 2-parters actually be one episode makes perfect sense.
Oh yeah, and I think that tends to be the way it is, and the more action and the more characters you have in a comic story, the more space that takes up, where it would necessarily, where it would boil down a lot quicker in the TV show. So, the more action, especially, is in a comic, the more positively the TV show compares, the more stuff they can fit into what would be the same amount of time.
So when it comes to writing these, I mean, you've wrote a significant amount already from what we've seen. What do you think is like your strength when you write a comic or an arc? Like when you get an idea, or if someone gives you an idea, how do you feel that you'd be able to convey it to your strengths? Like how do you think it's the best way that you write a comic, if that makes sense?
I think in a lot of cases, my strength is in writing dialogue. I'm generally pretty good at getting a feel for characters and, sort of writing not necessarily naturally, but getting in a flow with the dialogue and having sort of fun, snappy dialogue in there is, that's what I love. And it's not always something that translates in pitches, so occasionally I have to, do some convincing of Bobby. It's like, oh no, once I start writing, this is you're gonna see what I'm doing here. But, that's probably my strength. Whereas I tend to, I think probably my weakness is I tend to overshoot the amount of stuff that will actually fit in a comic book. Especially considering, I usually write my independent stuff at, 24 plus pages, and, pony comics are 20 pages at this point.
Gee, I wouldn't have imagined that you were natural at writing dialogue, considering how big of a Spitfire Adrian is, especially whenever someone calls her a fair maiden.
That's my favorite thing to do is have characters that sort of pop and have kicks and have voices, and I think that's one of the strong points of Friendship is Magic as compared to so many other cartoons, even previous generations of My Little Pony, is that the characters have very strong voices, and it's if you watch enough episodes, it's easy to pick up those rhythms, and it's really easy to tell when you've gone off course and go, oh no, this is definitely not something Pinkie Pie would say. Let me go back and try that again.
Banter is definitely one of the things that I'd imagine is one of the most noticeable points of the show, because not only does it, move the show along, but you get the capability to toss in all of the jokes and like the funny facial expressions, especially in the comics. Like, I was reading the Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon Friends Forever, and just being not only the banter, but just the expressions that the characters have, both in like horror and sarcasm, like throughout the entire series, is just really, it's like memorable. And it's funny when you think about how one frame or one line can stick in your head and just make you think about that entire comic.
Yeah, and I think Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon was a fun story for me to write, because it was one of those things that I for some reason nobody else had done it, and it just occurred to me, and I was like, why hasn't anybody done a villain Friends Forever? Like, these, especially at that point in, the show, they were both rather villainous characters, and I had to I pitched it to Bobby, it's like, what if, we do a Friends Forever story, we have Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon as the main characters, and the lesson is they don't learn anything. Like, of course they don't learn anything. Like, these characters have not learned anything for, 4 years at this point. Like, why would we change that?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, they're entertaining as little snits, so it'll be interesting to see how that ends up changing now that Diamond Tiara has seen the error of her ways.
Yeah, I'm curious. Because I'm glad I got that comic out before that episode came out.
Oh, yeah, poor Christina.
Yeah, because I would, that's one of the hardest parts of doing this is, when you write a comic, in most cases you're writing it, 4 to 6 months before the comic actually comes out. And, if the show is coming out at that point, we're talking 4 shows a month, and, over the course of 6 months, who knows what could happen.
Yeah, you're kind of like playing the time game when it comes to whether... Because if the comic comes out like 2 days after some major villain is reformed and you write a huge, dark villain story, it's kind of silly when it comes to the timing of that. Yeah, and I mean,
Hasbro has been good with catching a lot of the larger things. Like, when I did the, Babs and Rarity story, it was coming out like a month before they reveal in the show that she got her cutie mark, and it was in cutting her hair, or in hair cutting. And I was like, when the first draft of that went in, they were like, hey, look, this is going to happen. So just so you know, because there's already a scene in the comic with Babs having her hair threatened just to be cut, actually. You can still do that. Just make sure it's something that keeps in line with what we're doing. If you can allude to that, and that worked out nicely because I got to put in that bit with her and the roller derby pony at the end, where she was really into her cool hair, and have that be a thing that people could read in the comic and then see later in the show and go, oh, it's all that connects. But yeah, sometimes there are things that are just little tonal things that don't really line up with something that just happened in the show, and I get emails or tweets from people that are like, well, how does this line up with the show? And I'm like, it doesn't. I didn't know. I didn't know 6 months ago when I wrote this story that there would be a 2-second scene between these characters that didn't really seem to line up with what I'd put in. And I'm sure when the TV writers wrote this however many probably and months ago before they sent it off to get animated, they had no idea that I was writing this comic where, there would be 5 pages that would make this interaction seem weird.
So how far in advance would you say the comics are written before they go to print?
It varies a little bit. I've had, I've gotten things that I've written and have come out. Usually about 3 months is the closest that'll be, because things are generally solicited 2 months. They're solicited 2 months out, so IDW has to put out previews of everything to go in Diamond's catalog 2 months beforehand. So generally, by the time that stuff goes out, the comic's already written. Yeah, I think a couple of the ones I'm doing right now or that I've got coming up are some of the closer ones. The upcoming one, which I know was in the list of questions with Prince Blueblood and Shining Armor, was probably about a 4-month turnaround total.
Yeah. And speaking of Blueblood and Shining Armor, how did you come up with the idea to do a Princes of Equestria story?
I had been wanting to do something with Shining Armor for a while. I like that character. I had written a pitch for a Shining Armor and Twilight story, and then Bobby was like, "This is a great pitch. We're already doing that comic. It's on the schedule already. Somebody else is writing it." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And so I had also pitched one for him and Cadence, and Bobby was like, "Actually, Katie is doing like a 4-part story about him and Cadence, so maybe don't do that." And yeah, that's where the them in high school story came out, and about the same time I was pitching that. So I was like, well, I guess I'm just going to wait on this. And it came to be something that I really enjoy the character Prince Blueblood, and I hate that he hasn't really come back in the show very much. At some point, I was just trying to figure out how he relates and where all the other, are there other princes? Where are the other princes? Are they all as silly and inept as Prince Blueblood? Yeah. And I was like, well, what if we did something, with him in Shining Armor? Because Shining Armor is so gung-ho and so driven and so worried about what people think of him, completely the opposite way that Blueblood is. Blueblood is sure that everybody just adores him because he's the greatest. So, it felt like a natural kind of odd couple pairing there. As soon as I thought about it, I was like, all right, I'm going to pitch that story. And yeah, again, that was one of those things that it just kind of sailed right through once we figured out what we were doing with it.
All right, so we're going to go into Dreamland for just a moment, and we're going to have this silliest answer or most dreaming answer you could ever think of. So if you could write a crossover comic or comic arc, a few, up to 3 issues or something with any other franchise, what would it be and why?
It's funny because I have an answer to this. Because last year at San Diego, I pitched this stupid story I knew was never going to happen to Bobby because of something else that they were doing, and I also ran it by Michael, our guy at Hasbro, and he was equally charmed with how stupid it was. But it was about we were doing signings there, and they had a big banner up at the IDW table for the Green Lantern Star Trek crossover. It's like, Bobby, can we start doing some big time superhero crossovers with My Little Pony? I think that'd be great. We can get this same thing going. He's like, I don't know. What are you talking about? And I was like, okay, hear me out.
That's always a good start. Hear me out.
Hear me out. So this spaceship crash lands in Equestria. And the last surviving son of Krypton gets out, right? And he's immediately adopted and raised by 2, very loving, caring ponies, and is raised believing that he's a pony until one day, his parents tell him that he actually has these powers that he's discovered because he's actually part of an alien race from another world. And I had the whole thing lined out. I was like, it's going to be Clark Cake instead of Clark Kent. course, he's adopted by the cake family. He works in the bakery.
This is
And,
beautiful.
Of course.
Yeah,
That's great.
He has
So good.
He's walking around on all fours. He has no clue that he's not a pony for most of his life. I think it'd be wonderful.
Did you feel like the Hasbro executive slowly like walking towards the door, like dialing 911 in his pocket, like?
I think his response to this pitch was, "No, we're not doing that."
Yeah.
Oh, but it would have been so much fun.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh my god, that's a beautiful answer.
Oh, that's wonderful.
That's the one that I really have figured out in my head and that I think would be wonderful. The one that I think would be a fantastic challenge to try and do is Batman My Little Pony. I'm just trying to imagine like Twilight giving Batman a lecture on like the wonders of friendship.
Yeah.
And like how he shouldn't try to be a loner and do everything by himself because friendship.
Yeah.
But he's Mr. Tall, Dark, and Angst.
Well, he's also like, I just
Batman.
punched a prisoner in the face like an hour ago, Twilight. Like you gotta try a little harder. Oh
Yeah, and that of course leads to some sort of great like Joker Discord team up too. So
Oh my god. You can hear I can see the people typing on Twitter right now and just begging you to do it, Jeremy.
yeah, you can hear the voices like right. You get the Mark Hamill Joker in there too, and just
Yes, it has to be Mark Hamill. It really does have to be Mark Hamill.
It's too good.
Yeah.
So
wow.
let's bounce back to the production of the comics for a minute. I'm curious as to the communication between... So, like, when you finish a script, is there a significant amount of communication between the crew of the comics, so, like, the colorist, Hasbro and all of that, like, after you finish the script? Or do you mostly write it and then it's hands-off except for the edits?
I think it depends a little bit on the creative team. I personally, the way it works from a writer standpoint is, I write the pitch, it goes to Bobby. Once Bobby approves it, it goes to Hasbro. Once Hasbro approves it, it comes back to me. I write the script, it goes to Bobby. Once Bobby approves it, it goes to Hasbro. Once Hasbro approves it, it goes on to whoever's doing the pencils on it. In some cases, people like Tony that I know really well, who sort of brought me in on this. Like we go back and forth over some of the stuff in the script. When I was working with Andy on the 4-parter at the end of last year, at one point we were at a comic convention. I was in the middle of talking to him about some of his art. He was like, "Hey, hold on, come here a second. What does this mean in this script? Like, what am I supposed to be drawing here?" But yeah, in some cases, there are people who are, people like Agnes who do their own coloring as well. Like sometimes I'll send in a script and then I will get like a completed draft of the pages. And usually, in those cases, that's the next thing I see is the completed art. And Bobby will ask me to proofread it and see if we can find any errors in it. And usually, most of the errors end up being mine. I'll read the dialogue and I'll go, this just doesn't feel like I was thinking it was going to. Can we change this to this and move this around? Or I said people again. Can somebody change that to ponies? But yeah, that's most of the notes I make. I don't generally have to or need to note anything on art. Usually, if anybody has any questions, they come to me. But yeah, all the artists on the series, and I've worked with everybody but Jay. Have been fantastic and are easy to communicate with. So,
just a random side question: do you have like your own office, or do you do all of your comic writing from home?
I have a standing appointment at Starbucks. It's I try to do it from home. In a lot of cases, it's just home is full of distractions, whether it be my lovely wife or my daughter or just my Xbox One. Like there's always something here to distract me. And sometimes just getting out and just literally going to the coffee shop and putting on my headphones and shutting everything else out helps me to write, not just My Little Pony, but all the comics that I do. Occasionally, My Little Pony is a little different in that I have to go back and watch episodes occasionally. So that doesn't work as well from the Starbucks. But occasionally I'll have to say, I know that there's an interaction between these characters in this, or what was the resolution of this, problem they had in this other story 2 seasons ago. And like when you read a character who's not in the show a whole bunch, like Prince Blueblood, it's like, okay, I want to go back to his couple appearances and make sure that I have the voice right on that guy, because I can write Twilight in my sleep, but Prince Blueblood is a little less. You hear him a little less in the show.
Do you think any of the Starbucks employees would believe you if they were like, "Oh, hey, what are you doing on your laptop there?" And you're like, "Oh yeah, I'm writing a comic for pastel horses for in all ages."
I wonder sometimes, because I see other people at Starbucks, with their little computers open typing away, and I think, poser. Who's this guy up here with his computer set up writing a novel? Come on. What's this guy doing? That's
the classic cliche, right? Sitting at Starbucks, writing your novel, get it published eventually.
Right? Yeah, and I realize, I fully understand and accept the cliche nature of it. But it's just one of those things that, caffeine and relative silence are the keys to me actually getting anything done. So yeah, it's weird. I don't know if they would believe that I'm writing something. I don't know that they would believe if they came up to me in my generally Sunday morning in my ripped jeans and stained
shirt from the day before.
Yeah. I've got my, stained UNC hoodie and I'm sitting there typing on my computer, that they would believe that, I actually do, I'm published, I've won awards and stuff, really. This is legit, I guess. As legit as writing comic book skits.
And then they kissed. You're just sitting. Okay. So, speaking of the show, would you like to write for it if the later seasons wanted you to?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'd love to write an episode of the show. I don't have much experience writing for shows. I've done, playwriting and fiction, and obviously lots of comic books. So I have some sort of cross-genre experience. But I'd love to try and write something for the show. I think they've had some fantastic writers and some really interesting stuff on there. And if nothing else, I'd like to see some of the stories that I've done get adapted to this show one day.
Well, I'm definitely sure that once Princess gets picked up by a network somewhere, that you'll get tons of experience writing cartoon scripts all day long.
Yeah, my fingers are crossed on that one.
So this next question is going to kind of be hard to answer because your crossover idea was amazing, to say the least. But what is the silliest comic idea that you would want to write, even though it would never get published, ever in the history of the world, even 100 years from now, when the MLP comic is still going strong, you just know it can't happen?
That's a tough question, because most of my silly ideas have actually gotten through at this point. I think the one thing that I've done that I wanted to expound upon that I don't think would ever fly is in the issue I wrote with Spike and Luna. Spike goes into a comic shop. He's introduced by the other dragon working at the comic shop to a comic written by a dragon about dragons. And as I was describing that comic in the story, I was like, I want to write this comic. This sounds awesome. Mm-hmm. So I want to write and get published the comic that Spike is reading in the comic that I already got published.
I'd buy it.
So the side series on top of the Friends Forever side series of the show.
Yeah, and I was so excited about it when I was trying to figure out what it would be about, and I was like, it's this story about this great dragon that she's a good dragon, and all these sort of evil dragons get released from Tartarus, and this dragon has to go and get them recaptured to keep war from breaking out between the ponies and the dragons. And I was like, this sounds fantastic. I want to write this this story.
Awesome. Q, did you have any questions you wanted to ask?
Yeah. Well, I believe I ended up spending over an hour exclusively with Jeremy myself, so pretty much exhausted all of those. Although there is one little question. How much fun do you think it would be to actually write a crossover between My Little Pony and Star Trek The Next Generation?
I think that would be a ton of fun. I mean, because obviously it would have to be a Discord queue story.
Obviously.
Because, yeah, that's the obvious link there. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Next Generation, and I love that cast of characters, and I'd love to see the sort of interaction we'd get there. I can just really imagine the incredulous Jean-Luc Picard having to, put up with working with magical pastel ponies, from a strange world.
Just imagine Pinkie Pie and Worf.
Yeah, I think Worf and Dash would get along great.
Oh, they would. They would absolutely get along great. Let's see. I'm pretty sure Data would be confused by everything, most especially Pinkie Pie for reasons I don't understand, for reasons that we can probably all guess.
I feel like Data and Fluttershy is an obvious combination for me. Like, she'd be totally interested in the fact that Data had a cat, and be some fun relationship there. And I also get a picture of O'Brien just losing hair as Pinkie Pie just keeps pressing buttons on the teleporter. Just see what they do.
Oh no, not that. It's because Pinkie Pie teleports without the transporter.
Yeah, she's like, why do you have this? Just break the fourth wall like me.
Why do you have a little room here designed to send you somewhere else when you could just do this?
Just steps into the next panel. It's just like, see, it's easy. So, Jeremy, would you ever want to go to a brony convention? There's like a bunch, and I'm pretty sure a bunch of them would love to have you.
I haven't been to any to this point, but I am officially doing 2 this year. I have signed on, and I'm pretty sure been announced for BabsCon. I'm not sure if it's official yet, but I'm definitely doing BronyCon as well. So.
Oh, awesome! I get to see you at both. I'm going to both. Oh my gosh!
Awesome.
Fanboy moment.
So am I. We're probably gonna have to strike that because I'm pretty sure that BronyCon. Because I'm looking at the guest list right now, and it doesn't look like Jeremy's been officially announced yet for Babs.
Oh my goodness! Let's hope they get on that soon.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I sent all my profile and information and everything to BronyCon just this past week because I've been totally terrible about getting information out to Fox because they were like, hey, do you want to come? And I was like, yeah, sure. And they were like, okay, here's a contract to send it back to us. And I was like, yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. And then 3 months later, they were like, hey, about that contract. And I was like, oh, that thing. Let me do that. So
yeah, don't forget that.
Yeah. It just goes on top of the script, all of the other scripts that you're writing. You're like, oh my gosh, yeah, whoops, and then, oh my gosh. I mean, Q was just talking to me about a thing we were doing. He was like, hey, about that. It's so easy for stuff to pile up.
Yeah, every once in a while I get a message from, an artist or something that's like, hey, this comic we're working on. It's like, oh yeah, I am working on that thing, theoretically. Let me get back to you on that.
So, Jeremy, who is your, you've done a lot of comics. What is your favorite character to write for so far? Like, has it changed since the last time, either that you've been interviewed or the last time you've done a lot of comics? And then what character of interest would you want to write for in the future?
It's an interesting answer for me because I feel like if you look at especially the Friends Forever stories I've done, the answer is pretty clear. I really like writing for both Discord and Luna. I didn't realize they were going to do this, but Hasbro published like one of those little hardcovers with 3 comics that was like my first Discord story, my first Luna story, and then my Luna and Discord story. And I was like, oh yeah, I've done a lot of stuff with those too. The character that is also the answer to this question and is the answer to the other question is Twilight, and that I really enjoy writing Twilight Sparkle. I have a gag with her in like just about every issue I've written. You know, she's always got a little bit in there somewhere. You know, there's a bit in the Pinkie Pie Luna story where it's one of my favorite visual gags where like and that Tony nailed in the comic too, and that like Luna goes to Twilight for advice on being funny, and Twilight's answer to this is to read a bunch of books about being funny.
Uh-huh.
And like she's talking about how like the key to being funny is like is doing something to an exaggerated level, and you know, for it to take it steps beyond, you know, what's a natural progression. And as she's doing this, like Luna is being buried in books. As I was reading it when I got the comic back, and I was like, oh my god, this is so funny. I wrote that. Okay. It looks much funnier with the visuals. But like I love doing stuff with Twilight, and I have yet to actually get a Friends Forever that features her as one of the main characters, because she's always in demand. And you know, we try to rotate as much as we can through Friends Forever so that, you know, it's not Pinkie Pie Team Up or something like that, and everybody gets sort of time to be in the spotlight. So yeah, I'd love to do something more focused on Twilight. You know, it's not just a Star Wars joke in the darkest moment of the darkest comic.
So, how about pairings? Like, I would imagine that your favorite pairing to write for was either the Luna or the Pinkie Pie. But is there like a pairing that you're just dying to write that either like no one has written yet, or you have like another story idea, that a pairing that's already done and you're just like waiting for the rotation to come around?
Yeah, I just finished writing another comic that features Luna, which I think is a good Friends Forever story with, you know, Luna and somebody that I think she plays well off of. And this is totally Andy's fault, but I want to do a Luna Celestia story. It's just like them, that just takes them down like 8 notches from being godlike figures to being sisters.
Oh my god, you have no idea how much everyone would love you the moment that gets published.
Blame my sister. I'm with stupid.
Yeah.
I love that print.
Yeah, I love that idea, and I've pitched that idea, and it's just getting it around the right, you know, having the right thing to hang it on. Because, you know, I've sort of, I pitched it to Bobby as being, you know, a baby shower thing where, you know, both of them are shopping for presents for Cadence for a baby shower, you know, because of the proximity to the show, to everything going on around Cadence being pregnant. He was like, yeah, let's stay away from that. That's the kind of idea I wanted with them, with those two having to shop. I think would be a fantastic idea. You know, them going in together to try and find something, and, you know, bickering about what would be the perfect thing. You know, sort of, that's what I'd like to do. It's just getting the right story to do with it. And I always want to do stuff with Celestia.
And then, of course,
she hasn't been in a whole lot of the Friends Forever stories.
Yeah, Celestia's very underused. And then, of course, once they actually pick the darned item that they're looking for, they're going to forget it on the kitchen table.
To fly across the country in order to bring it back. Accidentally pull the sun a little too far. Moon comes back up. They're like, oh no.
Yeah, I like the idea of doing stories that take Celestia down a peg, because she is, you know, so often presented as so serious and so important. I pitched several ideas, and none of them have quite landed, of, you know, just things where Celestia gets taken out of her element for some reason, and, you know, has to have kind of a struggle there, because I feel like Celestia is sort of an on-off kind of character. Like, either she's ruling, or she's, you know, sort of
trolling,
getting beat on the way to Twilight, having to do something.
Yeah, I'm sure if you throw Discord in the mix, everything will just spiral out of control as per usual.
Needs to be called like the Discord effect or something. The moment you add him in your story, it just gets like 20% more ridiculous or something. 20% more silly.
Yeah,
Sure.
I mean, I love writing stuff for Discord, and it's he's literally a character where anything can happen. You can make reference to whatever you want and do whatever you want, as long as you keep it within his voice and within his oeuvre. He's a fun character to play with.
Yeah, so use Discord to bring in Gem and the holograms. Okay, that's good to remember.
Yeah, that's that might be an interesting crossover. They started talking about My Little Pony Transformers at once after Tony did that Pinkie Pie and Optimus Prime picture. And it's like, I don't know how that would work. I think we should try and do a My Little Pony G.I. Joe. That would be the weirdest comic ever. Like guns and a My Little Pony story. Just I don't know. It seems weird.
Wait, were they actually contemplating this, or was it just like a joking type of thing?
Well, no, I don't think they've ever contemplated doing a G.I. Joe My Little Pony thing. But
I meant
Tony
the
did.
Transformers after the picture.
I don't know if they've ever really thought about doing it. I think it's as much a joke that gets passed around among people because there was such a strong response to that image.
And that in turn spawned 2 more images from IDW Limited featuring Vinyl Scratch and Soundwave, and then Megatron and Nightmare Moon. And as I'm just looking at those images there, I'm like, there's a story here. There is a really fun story to be told here.
Yeah, like the
Why
slice
is it not
of
being
life.
told?
Yeah, there's the slice of life story for Soundwave and Vinyl, and then like the more 3-panelish arc, huge epic scope for Nightmare Moon and Optimus.
There's something along those lines. 'Cause it's like, there is something there that just screams, this is a good idea. This is a really good idea. Why are we not doing it?
I'm not a huge Transformers guy. I don't know my mythology really well on Transformers, but I know if I were to do a Transformers My Little Pony story, that it would definitely involve Chrysalis and Starscream. Like, that's without question.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, wow. Oh, yes.
Q is loving this right now. Jeremy, you're giving all of us just this desire, all of these ideas, all of these crossovers. They must happen.
Send your letters to Hasbro, care of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we
That
always
probably wouldn't work too well.
Yeah, we always make the joke that, Hasbro is always listening to these podcasts because, of course. But yeah, I mean, totally. Once they hear that, they'll just be like, okay, and then they'll bounce it around a meeting room. But we'll get our letters started right now, Q, right after this podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
So I'm actually curious, considering that the comics are, separate from the main series, how much freedom are you given as far as writing the characters, whether they're, pre-existing or new?
In my experience, I've not had much issue with, with writing characters. Hasbro has not come back to me with any massive changes in how I've written any of the characters. I don't know in particular that even Bobby or Hasbro has wanted me to change anything dialogue-wise because it didn't fit with the character. Usually, if there are issues, they're plotting issues. This is something we're going to be very close to in the show, so we can't do this, or this goes against something that we're going to do in the show, or this is just not something we want to do occasionally. Yeah, I feel like Hasbro is really easy to work with, especially for a company the size of Hasbro.
Mm-hmm.
They don't note anything to death. They have a couple of suggestions usually, and I've only ever really had one story where I got notes that I was just that I had to go back to Bobby and go we just can't do this. We've got to change something. We're going to have to go back to them and figure something out. I think that was as much a misunderstanding in the initial pitch as anything, because that was all around the Discord time travel story that we did. Hasbro, when they got the script back, was like, wait, you've got him doing what? He's traveling through time? I don't know. That's going to mess a lot of things up.
Yeah, they're like, that's very sketchy. Butterfly effect and all that.
Yeah, except
Yeah.
they did it in the show, so.
Yeah, and that was what I went back to them with. I was like, you have time travel in your show. Twilight does it, on at least one occasion. And, their concern was, if Discord can time travel, doesn't that give us continuity problems? I was like, no, he's Discord. His mission isn't necessarily to win; it's just to cause chaos. So he doesn't necessarily have to be the sort of character that would go back and change things. But at the same time, we can take the approach that whatever Discord does in the past has already been done. You can't change the future, which is very much the same sort of idea as episode where Twilight travels into the past. So, I think their reaction was much more of a like, oh no, we're opening a really rough door here, and mine's like, oh no, it's a door that was already open. It was ajar. I opened it up a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. So it seems like, from what you're saying, that you seem to have, like, I'm not going to say problems, but the biggest barricade is the idea process, because you've been saying that there haven't been many changes to the scripts or anything, but like just coming up with the idea that gets like the green light seems to be the top part that either takes the most time or is the most difficult.
Well, yeah, because stories for the TV show are planned, in some cases years ahead.
Mm-hmm.
They don't, contrary to what some comic book readers think, tell us everything that's going to happen in the show years ahead of time.
Yeah.
Really? I did not know that at all.
Yeah, it doesn't happen that way. Usually we find out something if it's sort of a minefield effect, like if we step on a mine, we know.
Yeah.
Up till then, we don't even know that there are mines there.
All of the misspelled responses on Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, people have questions, and like I understand that, and I think for some people it's difficult to reconcile the idea that there are so many people telling so many stories, that are supposed to happen in the same universe, and I have a lot of people both on forums and in Twitter and everything that want to ask me questions about whether things matter or whether things really happened. It's like, everything matters and everything doesn't matter. I mean, it's a cartoon. Ultimately, like, it's supposed to be fun. That's the mission, is to tell good stories and have fun. At the same time, we want everything to read as well as possible, and to gel with the show as much as possible. We don't always know what they're doing, and they don't always know what we're doing. And ultimately, if it comes down to it, what the show says goes, because they make a lot more money than we do.
Have you seen Rick and Morty?
I've seen a little bit of Rick and Morty.
Yeah, because that quote that you said, how like some of it matters but none of it doesn't, that's the quote that immediately comes to mind in Rick and Morty, because I'm not gonna like spoil, but that's kind of one of the phrases where someone's just like, everything matters, but everything also doesn't matter. So let's just like get over that and continue. And I feel that's, because that sort of comic canon has been confirmed for a while now. That just like the comics are canon as long as it doesn't mess with the show in any way.
Yeah, and I think in some ways we've adapted to that, in the best way we can, and myself in particular, like. My instinct is to go after, when I see somebody from the show say, oh, we're not going to deal with that, oh, we're not going to do that thing, I go, okay, cool, then we can do that.
Yeah, you get a little more leeway.
Mine!
Yeah, I think Sombra is a big example, because, they said specifically, yeah, we're not going to bring Sombra back, Sombra's gone. Mm-hmm. And I was like, cool.
Yeah.
Let me write that origin story about Sombra, and then we'll do this whole other thing.
Yeah, I call dibs.
Yeah, because that was the selling point of Sombra in the Pinch of His Magic to me, is like, Kitty got first dibs and she got Chrysalis, and Chrysalis is the only one that right out I would have been like, yes, let me do that character. So, I got the option of doing Sombra or Nightmare Moon or T-Rek. Honestly, I think T-Rek is kind of boring. He's not gone far enough to be a fun, like, Doctor Doom type character to write, but he's also just very self-serious and has a pretty fleshed out idea of where he comes from, whether it be what they've confirmed in the show or, what goes back to the previous generations. And, Nightmare Moon is the same way. Like, that story is pretty much told. And Sombra, it was one of those things where my first thought was like, oh, there's nothing to this guy. Like, why would I choose to write about the guy that 2 lines in the 2-part episode where he is both introduced and killed? And that the show folks were like, oh, no, we're not going to do anything else with this character. And then I thought, well, that means I could do anything I want to. He is a blank slate that they have said they're not going back to. So I can actually just, create this character pretty much whole cloth, not have to worry about stepping on the shoes of the TV, or stepping on the shoes of the TV show. And, that led to us then being able to go on and do the Siege of the Crystal Empire story as well.
And then the show brought him back for a 2-second cameo in the Ponyville in the World War Equestria timeline of the Season 5 finale.
That was pretty fun.
Yeah, I figure that's, the Sombra of Equestria 2, right? He's, or Equestria 3 or 12 or whatever it is.
Whereas what your Sombra would have become had he actually succeeded in his plans and not been foiled by the meddling Alicorn and her friends.
Yes. and their talking dragon. So, Jeremy, you mentioned that you have an Xbox One, so what types of video games have you been playing lately?
So funnily enough, I had to relent and get the Xbox One because my wife is a Fallout junkie. With the new Fallout coming out, it suddenly turned from me trying to convince her that we needed to get an Xbox One to her going, so are we going to get an Xbox One so I can play Fallout? So I've been trying to play a little bit of everything since I got it. I've got a lot of downloaded games and stuff on there. I'm really enjoying Rise of the Tomb Raider right now. It's just a beautifully made and really interesting game. I enjoyed the predecessor to that one, so I was really glad to have that, the chance to play that. I played the Lego games with my daughter because she's 5 and it's something that she can manage without getting super frustrated most of the time. We're in the middle of the new Lego Avengers game right now.
So you haven't introduced her to the Lego Dimensions games yet?
No, we haven't messed with Lego Dimensions. I mean, at this point, she is happy with just about whatever she gets. So adding something that requires the number of accessories that Dimensions seems to require, and isn't necessarily any vastly superior to what we're doing right now. Because I'm really enjoying the Avengers game at this point, and I'm glad to be doing that. Though I was a little peeved at EA and Traveler's Tales when we finished the Lego Hobbit game and discovered that it wasn't finished.
It wasn't? Aw.
Yeah, the Lego Hobbit video game ends at the end of the second film. Smaug flies off into the distance and, to go raise Lake down, and then you're done.
Oh, that's a bummer. Very anticlimactic.
Yeah.
So what, are they going to sell the rest of it as a DLC?
Apparently that was originally the plan because it was released just before the third movie came out, and then I guess either they got too busy doing other things or didn't make enough money off of it because they scrapped the plan to do a DLC. And so apparently it's just forever unfinished.
All right, and then the final question I have for you, Jeremy, is there anything else that you do in your spare time apart from video games?
Well, I don't have a ton of spare time right now. I write my all ages comic Princess, and I play games with my daughter. I have a full-time job beyond comic writing, so comic writing is my other job at this point. So, I've been trying to work out recently and get in shape because I have a 5-year-old to chase around. So, yeah, I mean, beyond playing games and writing comics and reading the comics that other people are making, and catching movies occasionally when I can. Not a lot of hobbies recently. So.
All right. So before we close, is there anything else that you would like to say to either the members of Equestria Daily or the fandom, besides buy all your comics?
Buy all my comics.
Buy your other comics.
Well, apparently I can't tell them I'll see them other places because those aren't announced yet. Well, let's see. I mean, obviously we can say that everybody already is going to buy the Shining Armor Prince Blueblood story, and they totally should because I got the finished art back from Tony the other day to edit, and it looks fantastic. And I think it's going to be a ton of fun, especially for people who are fans of those characters. And hopefully we'll get a trade of the Siege of the Crystal Empire stuff, and everybody can sit down and read that as one block.
Yeah, the trade for the Siege of the Crystal Empire arc is scheduled to come out later this year.
Yeah, that'll be good. I've been waiting on that. I kind of wish they'd either include or force everybody to read before they buy it the Fiendship is Magic story. So
for context reasons.
Yeah, you gotta. If you don't read that one, you don't know the sort of origin story that leads into the Siege story. So, I mean, we cover it very quickly at the beginning of the Siege story, which people were irritated about when they read it, having already read it. But I was like, yeah, not everybody will have seen that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's kind of the issue with having a comic arc that's just continuously expanding, because I know a lot of people are hesitant to pick up comics when they feel that they missed a major plot point like 20 issues prior.
Case in point, the Marvel Universe.
Yeah, basically the Marvel Universe. When they're not rebooting it, everyone feels that they have fallen behind.
I think that's generally the nice thing about the Pony comics is, you can generally pick up any story and, go from there. They may have some continuity with the cartoons, but especially with the Friends Forever stories, you can generally pick up any issue of Friends Forever and just read that, not having really seen any of the show, which is a really nice thing because I think team-up comics like that are more rare in the larger comics biz these days. So it's nice to have that, especially considering some large percentage of the people reading it will be kids that this may be their first experience with comics.
Yeah, definitely. I think both the show and the comic has you sort of pride yourselves on the fact that you can pretty much pick up any of them as long as it's not like in the middle of an arc, and you can read it and not only understand the characters, like you don't need all the characters explained in front of you, but you can you can just pick it up, read it, and then if you like it, you can continue and you get like the bigger world. And I think that both the comics and the show are really excellent at being able to do that consistently, which is even more impressive.
And even then with the two-parters, they're generally written in such a way that you can read part one and kind of get a feel for what's going to happen in part two, or you can just pick up part two and really get the gist of what happened to leading up to the events of part two without too much difficulty, which is really, really nice. And definitely something you don't see very often.
Yeah. I think, more than anything, if I were to say anything to fans, it's that Pony comics are supposed to be, or Pony stuff in general, are supposed to be fun, bring people together, and, they're about friendship and fun stuff. And I want people who, reading them to have a good time. And I hate to see people get into, virulent arguments, whether it be about the show or the comics, and get online and tear other people apart. That's not what the show is about. That's not the message of the show. And I think people could benefit from paying a little more attention to the message of the show sometimes, and less attention to how they feel about one or the other plot detail.
After all, the message of the show is right there in the title.
Yeah. Well, all of us have had fun reading all the comics. Like, Q pretty much has an encyclopedic knowledge of the comics, but I fell behind a little bit, and I recently picked up the Diamond and Silver Spoon Friendship Forever, and I was like, oh my god, this is just a blast. So I'd say that you guys are doing really well over there, and, I hope that it continues for, years, hopefully decades to come.
Jen Blake needs to draw more comics.
Well, I am doing my best on that, because I don't know if you caught this, but Jen is doing a short Princeless story for our anthology we're doing. So, we're doing a big charity anthology for Princeless, and Jen is illustrating one of those for me. Tony's in that too, so I have recruited these amazing people to do more comics for me, even when they're not doing pony comics. So
yeah, Seth has been getting on my case for pretty much about a year now, since it's been that long since the Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon issue came out, for more Jen Blake in the comics. So Bobby, if you're listening, please, for my sanity.
Oh, well, he is listening. We've already got that figured out.
Of course he is. Of course he
well,
is.
I know for sure that Jen desperately wants me to write rarity-focused stories for her to draw, because she loves some rarity. So.
Oh, that shouldn't be too hard. Just have her babysit Angel Bunny for a weekend.
Oh my goodness, beautiful.
Just imagine. Well, you don't have to imagine it. You already wrote it. You know how Angel and Opal get along.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's a fun duo to write, and I think if I can get away with writing more pets-only comics, that I would do more with those too. Because I remember telling people that it's sort of like that story is sort of an Angel comic until Opal shows up and just sort of steals the show. Opal's the Wolverine of my pet squad.
Absolutely beautiful. Is there what are the places that other people can contact you and see your other works, Jeremy?
So I am on Twitter. Obviously, it's JRome58, so JROME58, and I'm always on there. I'm on Tumblr, where I'm usually talking about my creator-owned work, Princeless. It's princelesscomic.tumblr.com. And I also have a website that I am very bad at updating, but plenty of valid contact information, which is jeremywhitley.com. And then I'll be at plenty of conventions, the first half of this year. I know I'm doing AwesomeCon in DC again, which I know Q got out to last year.
Thank you for inviting me to moderate that panel.
Oh, it was a blast. Pony people are wonderful, so I love doing stuff at shows, because especially pony stuff at shows, you actually get to run into and talk to kids, and they get to ask you kid questions about stuff, which is not always the experience online of writing pony comics.
Yeah. I was actually surprised that Agnes was able to draw as many little drawings as she did for all the kids after I had run out of comics to give out.
And she's sitting right next to me, so she was flying through them. She's a monster.
Yeah, she was just handing me a stack of them, like every couple of minutes, like, okay, give these out to the next few bunches of kids. Kids, as they come up and ask questions, and I'm like, wow, that was just such a fun panel.
Oh yeah, and hopefully we do some fun stuff like that again this year. I don't know who all is coming, because they're still fairly early in their process of announcing guests and stuff. But that show is always great. I'm doing Heroes in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'm going to try and get around to, obviously, I'm going to places that we cannot say or did not say already. But, try and get up and down the East Coast a little bit, and hopefully around to some other spots before later in this year, because I think I'm going to slow down quite a bit, in the second half of the year.
Well, I'd like to thank you very much, Jeremy, for being on board for the podcast, being our first person that we've interviewed ever. Yeah, totally. But you feel free to tell all the other ones how awesome it was, or not. I mean, if it wasn't awesome, that's okay too. But you've been a very good sport, and I very much would like to thank you for that.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and yeah, I will be sure to pass the word. So I think I finally figured out what it is I'm supposed to be telling people, because we were talking about messages of My Little Pony and everything, and I think I'm gonna go back to the message of Bill and Ted and just tell people to be excellent to each other.
Be excellent dudes. I gotta watch that movie again. All right. Well, I think that'll conclude this week's episode of the Equestria Daily Fandom Podcast. I would very much, as I already have, like to thank Jeremy Whitley for guest starring, and I'd like to thank Illustrious Q.
You're very welcome, Vic.
And Alistair Black for sitting in with us.
Anytime.
Bye-bye, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Have fun.